The music was loud, the lights were bright, and everyone at the company celebration seemed to be having the perfect evening. I had only planned to stay for 30 minutes because my wife, Natalie, had told me she wanted to enjoy the night with her coworkers. I decided to surprise her with a visit because I missed spending time with her. 4 months, we had both been busy, and I thought showing up would remind her that even small moments together mattered. But the moment I entered the ballroom, everything changed. Across the room, I saw Natalie standing close to another man, laughing as if the entire world around them had disappeared. For a few seconds, I stood frozen. My first instinct was anger, but something inside me told me to stay calm. I watched quietly, not because I didn't care, but because I wanted to understand what I was seeing. Then I made a decision nobody expected. I turned around, walked toward the exit, and left without saying a single word. The drive home that night felt longer than any journey I had ever taken. My mind replayed the scene again and again. I thought about the years Natalie and I had spent together, the memories we created, and the promises we made when we believed nothing could separate us. But I also thought about the distance that had slowly appeared between us. The truth was, our marriage had not become difficult overnight. It happened through small moments that we both ignored. Conversations became shorter. Time together became rare. We stopped asking each other how we truly felt. I had convinced myself that every relationship went through difficult seasons and that things would eventually return to normal. But standing in that party changed something inside me. I realized I had been holding on to the memory of who we used to be instead of accepting the reality of where we were. Walking away wasn't about revenge. It was about finally listening to the feelings I had ignored for too long. When I arrived home, I didn't throw anything, make angry phone calls, or send emotional messages. I simply sat in the quiet living room and thought about what I wanted my next step to be. Anger fades, but decisions made in anger can create regrets. I wanted clarity, not chaos. I opened an old photo album and looked through pictures from the beginning of our relationship. There were photos of vacations, birthdays, and ordinary days that somehow became unforgettable memories. I smiled at some of them, but I also felt sadness because I knew something had changed. The person I loved was still someone I cared about, but I couldn't ignore how disconnected we had become. That night, I wrote down everything I was feeling. Not accusations. Not complaints. Just honesty. I wrote about feeling invisible, about missing the connection we once had, and about wanting a relationship where both people chose each other every day. A few hours later, my phone started ringing. It was Natalie. Then another call came. Then another. I watched the screen light up, but I didn't answer immediately. I knew that if I spoke while emotions were still high, the conversation would turn into a fight instead of a real discussion. Eventually, I answered. There was silence on the other side. Natalie asked where I had gone and why I left without saying anything. I calmly told her that I saw her at the party and decided I needed time to process my feelings. She sounded surprised because she expected anger. She expected questions. She expected an argument. What she didn't expect was silence. I explained that my silence wasn't weakness. It was the first time in a long time that I had chosen to protect my peace instead of immediately reacting. That conversation became the beginning of a much deeper discussion about everything we had avoided. The next day, Natalie and I sat down and talked honestly for the first time in months. She explained the situation from her perspective, and I listened carefully. I also shared how I had been feeling for a long time. The biggest issue wasn't one moment at a party. The biggest issue was that we had stopped communicating before things became serious. We had both allowed distance to grow between us because difficult conversations felt uncomfortable. Natalie admitted she didn't realize how much I had been carrying inside. I admitted I had hidden my feelings because I thought staying quiet would keep the peace. But peace built on silence is not real peace. It is simply a problem waiting to appear. That conversation didn't magically fix everything, but it created something we had been missing: honesty. For the first time in a long time, we were no longer pretending everything was fine. Over the following weeks, Natalie and I worked on understanding where we had gone wrong. We didn't try to erase the past or pretend there were no problems. Instead, we focused on rebuilding trust and communication. We started spending more time together without distractions. We made an effort to talk about our feelings before frustration turned into resentment. It wasn't always easy. Some conversations were uncomfortable, and some truths were difficult to accept. But we both realized that avoiding problems had only made them stronger. The party that night had forced us to confront something we had ignored for too long. Relationships don't survive because problems never happen. They survive because two people are willing to face those problems together. Slowly, we started finding pieces of the connection we thought we had lost. Months later, people who knew about that night were still surprised by how differently everything turned out. Many expected a dramatic argument or a public confrontation. Instead, my quiet exit became the moment that changed everything. I learned that sometimes the strongest response is not the loudest one. Walking away gave me time to think, and it gave Natalie time to understand the seriousness of what had happened. We both learned that relationships require attention, honesty, and effort from both sides. A person cannot carry an entire relationship alone while hoping things will improve. Love is not just about staying during good moments. It is about choosing each other when things become difficult. That night at the party was painful, but it also forced us to stop avoiding conversations we desperately needed to have. Looking back now, I still remember walking into that party and the moment everything seemed to stop. I remember the music, the conversations around me, and the decision I made to quietly leave. At the time, I thought I was walking away from something I had lost. But later, I realized I was walking toward something I needed: self-respect, honesty, and peace. My silent exit shocked everyone because they expected anger, but they saw something different instead: someone choosing control over chaos. That night taught me an important lesson. Sometimes people think strength is proving you are right or making someone regret their choices. But real strength comes from knowing your worth and choosing what kind of future you want. Whether relationships survive or end, the most important thing is never losing yourself while trying to hold on to someone else.